Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Mckenzie, let me ask you, as I understand it, one of our primary missions in Afghanistan was training the Afghan armed forces. We also equipped them with approximately $83 billion in military equipment, but we always provided them extensive support in the form of intelligence and surveillance, air support, logistics, including contract aircraft maintenance and special operation advisors. General Mckenzie, were the Afghan armed forces ever trained to fight the Taliban without U.S. support of any kind?
So, Senator, some elements of the Afghan military could fight very well without our support. Some of the elite commando units. Obviously, we know from the example that we saw in August that other elements were unable to do that. And in fact, as we began to withdraw our support during the withdrawal operation, we began to see the effects of that. You know, we shifted to an over-the-horizon model for aviation maintenance. That is difficult to do in the United States in a technologically literate population. It is harder to do in Afghanistan. We were having some small success with that, and actually the Afghan Air Force continued to fly strikes up until well into August. But they were nonetheless on a general negative attrition.
What percentage would you term as elite?
Oh, I'd say less than 5%.
Okay, and so really, for 95%, it's really it was unrealistic for us to expect them to be able to fight alone at that point in July and August of this year.
The combination of the obvious withdrawal of the U.S., which had a profound psychological effect, because I think in the mind of the soldier, you know, that the Taliban and the Afghan military, they have the same DNA. So it comes down to the fighting heart of the man on the ground. And I think that that the Taliban were heartened by what they saw happen at Doha and what followed, and our eventual decision to get out by a certain date. I think the Afghans were very weakened by that morally and spiritually, if you will.
Thank you. Good. Let me rush on then to try to get another question in. Secretary Austin, the reports in the New York Times are that you warned the president all the way back in March that there could be dire outcomes in which the Afghan military folded in an aggressive advance by the Taliban, and that you drew comparisons between that and our experience in Iraq, where a disaster unfolded and we were required to go back in. According to the same article, you warned the president, we've seen this movie before. I know you don't want to tell us what advice you give to the president. What was that your feeling, and did you make known the comparison with Iraq, and did you feel we had seen this movie before?
Thanks, Senator. Again, you're right. I won't. I'll keep my conversations, my recommendations to the president confidential. But I would say that as we worked our way through the process here, we laid out, you know, all potential consequences that could result from any course of action that we took, and we were clear-eyed about that. And so, you know, there were inputs coming
with regard to Iraq. That's my question, Mr. Secretary.
Well, certainly, then we get back to the specific conversation that I would have had. But it's clear that I have a history with Iraq. It's clear that I've learned. You know, there are lessons to be learned from Iraq, and I would certainly.
Was it your feeling that we had seen this movie before?
Well, there's certainly some of the same kinds of things could transpire as we look to transition.
Okay. Speaking of things transpiring, one was that we had to go back into Iraq. Secretary Austin, does the Department of Defense have plans in place to redeploy U.S. combat troops to Afghanistan in the event that our intelligence estimates prove true and our homeland security is in fact threatened?
Currently, the president's decision, Senator, as you know, is that we've left Afghanistan, and so we've not been tasked to construct any plans to go back into Afghanistan.
So there are no such plans in place?
No.
Right. General Milley, of the conditions that were required of the Taliban in the agreement, only one was met. Is that correct?
That's correct. The condition was, the one that was met was the most important one, which was don't attack us or the coalition forces, and they didn't.
And so President Trump made a recommendation, gave an order that we leave on 15 January.
Correct.
And the advice came back from the military strongly that that was not a good idea. And based on that advice, the president rescinded that order. Is that correct?
Correct.
And none of those conditions that President Trump based his decision on had been met in 2021 when President Biden made the same, in fact, the same decision. Is that correct?
Those conditions were never met. That's correct.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.